Welcome back to the channel. If you want to learn how to file taxes with no income, here are the steps you need right now. Step number 1, you got to know the tax filing threshold. So the tax filing threshold is basically the amount of money you need to earn before you are legally required to file an income tax return with the IRS. So while this information may be subject to change as of the time of this show, for most taxpayers, the IRS sets this threshold at the standard deduction. This means what? It means that if your total income is less than the standard deduction for your filing status this year, you likely do not have to file a tax return with the IRS. You can literally skip tax season altogether. For taxpayers filing their taxes this year, the threshold is around $12,500 for single filers and $25,000 for a married couple. Okay, now obviously the standard deduction changes all the time, the amount changes all the time, so make sure that when you file your taxes, you have the right standard deduction amount at that time. So this is the case for most taxpayers. However, as with all things tax, there are several exceptions to this rule that can change an individual's filing threshold. There are two most common ones. If you are over 65, that's number one. If you are over 65, the filing threshold increases. You don't have to file taxes if you earn less than $14,000 for single filers and nearly $28,000 for married couples. If you are self-employed, there is almost no filing threshold because you must file taxes if you earn more than $400 or $600 combined. This is because you will owe payroll taxes. And the tax filing threshold applies to all taxable income that you receive over the course of the year, even if additional deductions and credits would reduce your income or even zero it out altogether. You must file taxes if your total earnings exceed the threshold. So to be clear, most Americans pay some kind or kinds of taxes. Firstly, all workers owe the payroll tax no matter how little they earn. There is a flat 7.65% tax that applies up to the payroll tax cap. Okay, so the tax cap this year it was around $147,000, after which the payroll tax no longer applies to each new dollar of income. Secondly, most Americans pay sales taxes on the products and services they buy. So this form of tax is less noticeable because people pay it in small amounts over time. Step number 2. You really have to know how to file an income tax return with no income. See, the most important thing to remember here is that filing a tax return is always important. So you have to make sure you do it before the deadline. But what is the procedure when you don't have enough income last year? Well, the good news is that you're not forced to file a return if you did not get any, if you don't have any income in the last tax year. Every single year, there are some minimum income requirements imposed by the IRS, and this changes annually depending on your tax filing or inflation. So your requirements can change based on whether you file jointly, you are married but filing separately, you are single, and so on and so forth. So a tax return is not mandatory if you have no income. Still, you may want to do it regardless because there are some huge reasons for it. Okay, now filing despite getting no income the last tax year will allow you to claim some refundable tax credit. This is really important. Remember, the key word here is refundable tax credits. In other words, you are getting money from the IRS because of those tax credits. So this can then offer you some tax refunds. This applies even if you don't have a job. Therefore, it is possible for you to qualify for example, the additional child tax credit, the ACTC, or the earned income tax credit. So those two credits, they are both refundable. Okay, they're called refundable tax credits. So besides, you can also file if you earned very little income last year. This makes it possible for you to recover taxes that were withheld from the last time you paid. Okay, it is a scenario that occurs when you had a job, for example, but only had it for a small part of the last year. However, it's also possible in cases when a person goes to college and has very little income. So what I'm trying to say here is what? Filing a return will give you the opportunity to use the American Opportunity Credit if you are in college. Okay, so meanwhile, there are things are a little different for people who are self-employed or who have a small business. Basically, if you earn over $400 from this, you do have to file a return. Very important. And some confusion is it happens by this type of situation, and when the income level of the contractor is over $400 but less than the threshold that the W-2 employees should file at. Remember, the bottom line is you have to file your taxes if you make more than $400 as a self-employed individual. Not a problem on that. Okay, very important. Step number 3, boss. Again, I just want to remind you today's topic. We're speaking about how to file taxes with no income. So you got to know the requirements for filing income taxes in general. This is very important when it comes to who has to file taxes and who doesn't. The good thing is that there are individuals who don't have to do it. If you earned income the previous tax years but it was less than the IRS minimum, filing a tax return is not necessary. Whether you are the head of a household, single, claimed as a dependent, or another person's taxes, or filing jointly with your spouse, the minimum varies based on your filing status and age. So this is important to remember that you really have to acknowledge that fact. So every year, the minimum earned income also gets adjusted by the IRS for inflation. So people who are under the minimum will still be required to file tax returns if the new circumstances ask for it. So filing and paying self-employment tax will be required, as I said before, if you make more than $400. Okay, and so what am I trying? The thing is, when we talk about filing tax returns with no income, there are reasons to file with little or no income anyway. I've already talked about the tax credits. Those are refundable tax credits. Those two credits are really important. They put cash in your pocket. Okay, and it's always a great idea to file your taxes because it is quite possible that you may actually recoup some money from previous years. Let's say you overpaid on certain expenses, on certain deductions last year or 2 years ago or 3 years ago. This is kind of cool. And also, it's always good to file your taxes because you are able to track your expenses and your tax obligations better. Sometimes you might not owe anything at the federal level, but you might owe something at the state level. So if you file your federal taxes, you are able to have the proper paperwork to actually file after ultimately your state returns. Okay, so think of it as a way to just have paperwork. And honestly, if you use tax software, some tax software, if you have no income, they'll charge you nothing. It's free. So it's always great to file your taxes so you have the proper paperwork year after year after year after year. So you have no gap in your paperwork. And especially, sometimes when you are looking to apply, let's say you want to apply for some benefits or you want to apply for a loan and whatnot, and they are asking you for tax returns, you don't want to have a gap in your tax returns, okay? You want to have the proper paperwork. You want to have paperwork for every year, and that could be very beneficial for you. So the whole thing is that how does this apply to you? It's very important that you really, I just want to, now I want to personalize the whole conversation and talk about you, boss, you. So do you have to file taxes if you have no income? The thing is, you only have to file taxes if you make above the IRS imposed income thresholds, which vary based on your filing status. Okay, so boss, if you are single, you're married, you're married filing separately, this is basically based on your status. You can still file your taxes even if you have no income if you choose to do so, and you should do so, in our view, in our modest opinion. And can you file taxes with no income but have a child or dependent, boss? If you have no income but have a child or dependent, you can still file your taxes. This may allow you to get a refund if the tax credits you are eligible for are more than your income. Okay, do you have to pay taxes if you don't have a job, boss? Now, if you don't have a job, see, the thing is, when we talk about having no income, it's not the same thing as having no job. Those are two separate things. I mean, there is a correlation, that's true, but they're not the same thing. If you don't have a job, you will still have to file taxes if you meet the IRS minimum income thresholds. If you have no income, you are not required to file your taxes, but there may be benefits to doing so. What I'm trying to say is what? If you don't have a job, you can still generate enough income. See, there's something called passive income. You may receive some dividend income. Some people actually live comfortably without having a job, without having a 9-to-5 job. Okay, and so How can you file a zero income tax return? Well, you can file your zero income tax return just like any other tax return through the mail or online. The only thing is you just put 0000 on all the lines. As I said before, it's great to have this for paperwork reasons, so you are basically archiving your data, and you might need this at a later time for some benefits or some loans or whatever. You never know, okay? And the thing here is that you can actually file your zero income tax return online. Actually, you can use the IRS free file system or an online tool such as TurboTax, and they are free. If you have no income, they're not charging you anything, okay? So the benefit of filing a tax return, even if you don't have enough money, is that you are keeping paperwork, okay? This can lead you to receive a refund, or this can lead you to receive some paperwork to use later on for other applications. Let's talk about, boss, we are still talking. I just want to remind you of today's topic. We're speaking about how to file taxes with no income. I want to talk to you about getting a refund with tax credits. This is really important. I want to dig a little deeper here because I just mentioned it very briefly. And I think it's important because if you have no income, any source of income for you, any cash flow opportunity is great, right? So it is possible to obtain a refund with a tax credit. There are several tax credits offered by the IRS which can be taken off your taxes and not your income. If the credit you get is higher than the amount you have to pay in taxes, you can sometimes claim this extra credit as a refund. Also, even if your tax is $0, you have the chance to qualify for different tax credits, like the additional child tax credit or the earned income tax credit, which will then allow you to get a refund. So those are, according to our research, those are the two top refundable tax credits, okay? Now, just bear in mind that filing the 1040 and other tax forms is necessary if you want to be able to claim the credits, okay? In other words, you got to have the proof. You got to have the paperwork that goes with it. In addition, depending on the age of your child, the American Rescue Plan will boost your per child credit to $3,000 or $3,600, and this also expands the child tax credit. As such, you have to consider this for this tax return and this year's tax return, and you have to prepare the next year. So you can get a refund of the credit for this year, and the IRS can send you out advance payments for next year, rather, ensuring that people can get their money pretty fast. What I'm trying to say here is what? You have to make sure that you have the paperwork that goes with requesting the two refundable credits that I just mentioned. The IRS is very adamant at making sure that people actually are compliant because they're not going to send you free money. They want to make sure that you earn the money, that you deserve the cash. So make sure that you have the proper documentation for your additional, before claiming the additional child tax credit or the earned income tax credit. For both tax credit, there are income minimums. There are some requirements. There are some paperwork requirements. So make sure you actually have those. We actually have covered those two topics extensively on other shows. So if you are interested, let us know in the comment section, and we'll send you the link. I want to talk to you now about filing now so you can deduct later. See, the whole thing here is that when people ask us the question, how to file taxes with no income, or should I file taxes with no income, we always answer by yes, because you cannot claim as much as you want to. It all depends on the IRS, okay? But it's always important to file now so you can deduct later. This is because the IRS is the one putting a limit on how much you can claim with certain credits and deductions. For example, if a home office deduction will send your business into debt, you will be unable to claim the home office deduction since it's too large. You'll be able to claim zero business income for that year instead, which will then allow you to move into the next year carrying the leftover deduction. And what I'm trying to say here is that if you file now, you are able to actually, there's something called carry back or carry forward. So you are able to apply, let's say, some tax benefits to prior year or to future years. This is why you always want to have a record. You want the IRS to have a record of your taxes in their system. This is really important. So always file now. Again, you don't lose anything. And if you file online, this is even better. If you use tax preparation software, you don't lose anything, because if you have no income, they're not charging you anything. It's zero. It only takes 5-10 minutes of your time. You have literally nothing to do. Just sit down in one sitting and do everything. Okay, you file the paperwork. The IRS gets a copy of your 1040, and that's all you need. Now let me ask you a question. This is about money, boss. Basically, are you expecting a refund this year? In terms of, you have no income, but are you expecting an income refund from the additional child tax credit or the earned income tax credit? If you are receiving a refund, what are you going to do about the refund? Are you going to save the refund? Are you going to use the refund? Because see, if you have no income, chances are, I hope you have a job. But the thing is, you have to think about how to actually save the cash, how to actually manage the cash, because you can get a pretty substantial refund here. Especially if you have several children, you can receive a sizable refund. So think about how you're going to use the funds, and use the funds actually efficiently. The last thing I want you to do here is that I want you to protect yourself against future audits. This is very important. Now, the last thing you want to happen to you is an audit. So in terms of auditing old tax returns, the IRS operates under a statute of limitations. So when you make sure that you accurately report your information, they can only go back 3 years in general. But for the current year, it all starts only when you file the tax return. So if you don't file the return, there is no statute of limitation. Okay, so not filing the tax return puts you at risk of having an audit performed by the IRS at any time. So the IRS says that in situations where you don't want to file, it is essential to maintain all important financial records. Okay, otherwise you risk dealing with serious problems, and they can get unpleasant instantly. So this is really important. This is why I was just telling you earlier to make sure that you file so you have a record in IRS systems. Okay, even if you have no income, the whole thing is here is that you want to have a record, so that something happens. Let's say you file your tax return today, this year, and 3 years from now, if the IRS doesn't come back and audit you, then the statute of limitations will have ended, and they will not have the legal authority again to audit that. I'm not saying that there's anything to be audited on this year tax form, but you never know. Okay, you never know. So this is why you always have to file. Now, big decision time, boss. Big decision time. Let me ask you a question. Do you have no income? Do you want to file taxes with no income this year? If you do, please make sure that you have the required paperwork, especially if you want to, as I said before, if you want to request the refund, the refundable credit, make sure that you have the paperwork. Now, how do you save the paperwork? Well, it's all about archiving the paperwork. You can have it in terms of, you can have it physically in a closet, whatever, or even better, have it electronically. You want to save all your documents, all your invoices, all your expenses, all your credit card statements, all your debit card statements, anything that proves your eligibility for the additional child tax credit or the earned income tax credit. Please save that paperwork. You never know. Thank you so much for your attention. I really appreciate it. I was just talking to you today about how to file taxes with no income. So I spoke about you knowing the tax filing threshold, whether or not you should file an income tax return with no income, the requirements for filing income taxes, how the whole thing applies to you, getting a refund with tax credits. So I also talked to you about filing taxes now so you can deduct later, and also protect yourself against future audits. Thank you so much for your attention. I really appreciate it. God bless you. I'll see you next time. But until then, remember, stay marvelous.